Wake up, NHL fans. It is Tuesday. This is your morning cup of hockey alongside Colby Cohen. I'm Jonny Lazarus, and we have a great show today with
Can I ask you a question?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Why don't you say my name right?
What'd I say?
You don't say the L in my name. You do it
Colby
almost
Cohen?
every morning, and
Colby Cohen?
I'm always hoping you're gonna get it right, and you just never give me my full name. And if my mom were to listen to this show, she would be very disappointed with the fact that you introduce me every morning without getting my name correct.
I swear to God,
I'm just telling you what it sounds like when you say it.
Really? You couldn't bring this up off air?
I mean, honestly, I always forget about it, and then I have to listen to you for 45 minutes, and I forget, and I start doodling on my paper or reading Twitter or whatever else I do to pass the time with you. But, you should get my name right. It's the first thing we do to start the show.
I know your name. Like,
okay.
I feel like maybe just the way I talk. I don't know.
You talk fine, Johnny. Don't go there.
All right, well, do you want to do the rest of the intro?
Oh, I want you to do it. I just want you to get my name right.
Okay, alongside Colby Cohen, I'm Jonny Lazarus.
Thank you.
Better. We have our weekly segment with NHL Insider Frank Seravalli today, who'll be joining us any second here or any minute now. And then Colby and I will get into our NHL Top 5 Power Rankings. What a great start to the show. Colby, how are you doing?
How are you feeling today, bud? You sound
like
you're
horrible, man.
I
feel terrible. So
you texted us and said this is your Michael Jordan flu show. So we're really off to a good start this morning. But while we wait for Frank, let's address something from yesterday, which I'm starting to really enjoy this part of our show where we readdress things. And DFO's Instagram and maybe the Twitter, they put a video out of us, really me, and then you were chiming in and out talking about
it's usually how it works.
Talking about the
you talking
Islanders and how they didn't, dress the part for the Stadium Series, and how, to me, it shows that Lou is just so out of touch with how things work. He's got the thing with the facial hair, and he won't let his players have long hair. All things that I think are absolutely ridiculous. And it was really funny how all the Islanders fans just jumped on, just started jumping on the wagon and being like, oh, you want us to get rid of the GM because he wants to keep it classy in the NHL. We don't want it to be like the NFL, this and that. And, all these Islanders fans started jumping on me for this. And you know what? Cry some more, okay? It's one game. I'm a big fan of how NHL players look professional and they wear suits and guys dress up for 81 games a year, okay? But for the one game a year that's outdoors with a theme, these are themed events, okay? Why not play ball? Why not let the guys play ball? All right? We all talk about growing the game, okay? What have we been talking about since the Stadium Series? One of the big things we talk about was how great the Rangers pulled it off, and the Flyers with Rocky, and the Devils with their Sopranos. Like, these are relatable things to people who aren't hockey fans that see it on social media and they talk about it on talk radio. So I don't want to hear people saying, oh, Lou keeps it classy. You don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Like, give me an absolute break. Like, that is the worst take. Stop defending Lou Lamoriello. He's done nothing. You guys have won nothing. Great. You've made it to the conference finals a couple of times. And what happened? You didn't win. Okay. So stop telling me how great of a GM Lou Lamoriello is. The guy's completely out of touch. Completely out of touch. You try to get an Islanders player to do an interview, come on a show, do anything. They can't do it because they're worried what Lou will say. And then you, Johnny, were telling me about some social media kid. I don't even know, Coach Chippy Whippy or whatever his name is.
No.
Go ahead.
Don't discredit him, because Coach Chippy.
No, listen, he's great. He does his thing on social media, but give the story. Go ahead.
Coach Chippy's a guy I've met the last couple of months through like the creator part of the NHL, and he's a very popular NHL creator amongst the younger kids. Like, literally, this guy has thousands and thousands of views on all of his videos. He did a video at MetLife with Luke Hughes, Morgan Frost, and Alexis Lafreniere. There was no Islander player in his video, and that's because of Lou Lamoriello. And that's something that, maybe isn't a big deal to the older NHL fans, but when there are younger kids who follow this guy and love this guy and see all of his videos and comment on all of his videos, and there's no Islander player. Like, it sucks. It sucks for
We
the
want to
younger
grow the game, and the Islanders just got a beautiful new building.
They have the All-Star 2026.
Unbelievably dedicated ownership with Malkin and Ledecky. Ledecky's at every game. He's super friendly. I've had a chance to meet him. He loves that team. He'll do anything for that team, and I'm sure Malkin is the same way. They just go out and bring in a home run of a head coach. All right? It's time. It's time for Lou to go. These little things that people don't think matter, they do matter. They matter for free agents when they're thinking about, why would I want to go play for this guy who treats us like we're little kids and won't let us have a beard if we want? I mean, that's ridiculous. That shit is absolutely ridiculous. Guys are scared to do things on social media. They're scared to do interviews. That's not growing the game. All right. So the comments back towards me from Islanders fans, come on. I get it. You want to stick up for your organization? I'm not ripping on the organization. I'm ripping on Lou Lamoriello for how out of touch he is. Okay, so that's why I wanted to start the show today addressing that yesterday, because of all the heat in the comments on Daily Faceoff. We're going to be joined now by our main man, Frank Seravalli, and we're going to get into what's going on around the NHL, who's going to get traded, who's not going to get traded. So, Frank, it's good to see you this morning. I don't know if you heard my rant. I'm a little fired up to start the show today.
Because I heard it wrong.
Was Johnny part of the Rangers firefighting crew? He's just spraying all over the. Calm down, Colby. Don't get us killed.
But Colby's mad at me because apparently I've been saying his name wrong for the entire show. I don't know if you caught that, Frank.
Coach Chippy. All I heard was Coach Chippy and Chippy Whippy.
I'm sure your son likes Coach Chippy.
That has no idea who he is.
Perfect.
Oh, really?
Even better.
Never heard of him before.
Well, he's awesome. I highly recommend watching his content. But Frank,
the creator world is a really interesting world that you live in, Johnny.
You're a creator, Frank, whether you like it or not.
No,
you should be out there with me.
I'm a reporter. I deal in reality, not.
Johnny is a journalist and a report. I mean, Frank is a journalist and a reporter. Don't drag him into your creator bucket, Johnny. I don't see him out on the ice on MetLife with his selfie stick skating down the ice for breakaways.
It'd be a lot of fun if he was out there. I'd enjoy it, but
he has good hands.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic, Frank, we discussed it yesterday. I think it's starting to trend a little bit more around social media about these four teams possibly doing something every year: the Rangers, Devils, Flyers, Islanders. With how successful the weekend was, you're already shaking your head no. But do you think the NHL can build off the momentum of how successful the Stadium Series was this past weekend, and maybe not feature the same four teams, but instead of doing a Winter Classic and a Stadium Series, kind of doing it this way where there's four different markets involved every year?
It's going to be really hard. And I would say the answer is probably no, because look, the bottom line is, as successful as this weekend was, 150,000 people at MetLife for 2 consecutive days. It was beautiful. Everything about it was awesome, but the league charges a premium for these tickets. And there would be serious fatigue if you did it every year, even if it is the same 4 teams. So I understand what you're saying, and I think the idea is interesting, but it's hard to find geographical rivals. Like, part of the beauty of that Stadium Series is every person can go to that, every fan can go to that Stadium Series in their car. Flyers fans can drive up, Islander fans can cross New York and get to New Jersey. It's an easy spot to get to, and that's why it works. Pick another. There is no geographical environment kind of quite like that. You could maybe center something around like Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, and Minnesota, but even then, like, you really begin to stretch it.
Yeah.
And I think it was a great turnout, great event, but I don't think it has any sort of annual appeal, if that makes any sense, because I don't think they'd fill the stadium.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Frank, and I actually said a lot of those things yesterday on our show. But in fairness to Johnny, which I rarely am, it's definitely picking up steam amongst people. Al Morgani tweeted it, and you and I know Al so well. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's such a fun guy, and he's all about this area. I saw Molly Walker tweeted it. And then I know the Spit and Chicklets guys were talking about it too. So there are a lot of people that were super impressed with the way it looks. But at the end of the day, I think Frank nails it on the head. Everybody jumps on 95 and you go over maybe one bridge and 90 miles up the road, you're at the game. And I just don't see where else you could possibly do something like that with 4 teams. It just doesn't exist in hockey. So,
well, but you're leaving out the most important part of redoing this is the ticket prices. Like everyone's willing to do it for a one-off special event, but when it becomes the routine, then you either
what are
have
the
to
ticket prices like? I have no idea. Like how much more do they charge? I can't say I've ever really looked at that.
I don't know for sure, but typically the outdoor games are going for like for good seats, $350, $400, $500. Like
it's a lot.
I was told like 150 gets you in the building.
Yeah, 150 is kind of the bare minimum, and 150 for an NHL regular season game outside of the Rangers, like that gets you a club level seat for the most part and a really good ticket. 150 there gets you, you know, you're struggling to see the game kind of thing from the lower bowl, and that's I think it's a tough sell. Again, there's a million things involved. The cold, like not everyone wants to get bundled up and sit out there for a few hours. Add in the Jonas Brothers concert. You're talking about 6 hours outdoors in 20-degree weather. Like not everyone's ready for that.
But you know what's funny about it though?
He only went to the game for the Jonas Brothers concert.
I didn't go to that game. I was going to
say Saturday night that would have been the case, but Sunday he went for the Rangers.
I did watch it on the couch though, but I do want to say I feel like the narrative around here before the weekend, there were a lot of people who went to the games 10 years ago at Yankee Stadium and were like, you know, it was too cold, it was a terrible viewing experience, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And after the way the weekend went, the people that didn't go just are constantly regretting not going because of how the weekend and how the games went themselves. So it is one of those things though, that like when you do experience it for the first time and maybe it's not the best experience, you're not desperate to go back. So I get the every year aspect. It would get old very fast. But I just think something with these 4 teams and these 4 fan bases, it gave me just like, you know, the way I tweeted it was a Beanpot vibe. You know, it's obviously Boston, those schools are within like what, a 5-mile radius, the 4 schools.
Literally.
This is a little bit different, but this is a little bit different, but I can't think of any other professional sports league where there are 4 teams that have some sort of rivalry built within them in this close of a vicinity.
It's an intriguing idea. I just don't. Maybe if you changed it up a bit.
Yeah. But like it also, Frank, it works so well with the schedule that the Rangers and Devils both won their games and they play each other on Thursday. It's kind of like, you know, it would have been, you know, let's say a Stadium Series final or some sort. If you know,
well, did the Devils and Islanders give up their home games for this? That's the other part of it too.
Yes. Which is a huge advantage for the Rangers because that was basically a home game for them.
Yeah, I mean, if they were playing either one of those teams anyway in the regular season, it would basically still be a home game anyway.
And here's the last thing that I'm going to say about it, and then I do want to move on, Frank, because we do have a bunch of players we want to ask you about and a bunch of teams we want to ask you about. I think the NHL has flirted with too many outdoor games as it is. I don't necessarily think that we're there yet because we're still seeing the buildings completely selling out. So it's hard to say they're overdoing it when they're still selling upwards of 100,000 tickets, but I just feel like we have the right amount. We don't need to do any more than we're already seeing and doing because we don't want to overblow this whole thing. So,
I would completely agree. I think the league was, a little bit nervous about Saturday's game. You know, think about the billing heading into this. They were lucky in the sense that the Flyers have been competitive this year, but had they, you know, been where they were last year and the Devils are outside of the playoff picture, that might have been a really tough sell. And the fact that they had, I think, 5,000 more fans for Sunday's game kind of gives you an indication of what the NHL was thinking it might have been. So I agree. Like the fact that you're selling out, you're not overdoing it because it is special. It is still an event. But if it becomes part of the routine, that's when you're going to run into issues. And I think they've managed to straddle that line pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Frank, I want to start with a question that I just wonder if this is becoming a thing. And it's really with Noah Hanifin. And he's made it really clear via your reporting and what you talked about on your show, that he'd really like to end up in an American situation playing hockey. Whether it's Tampa, whether it's Boston, whether he's a rental, long-term, whatever the case may be. So before I ask you directly about Noah Hanifin, I just want to know, because I know you talk to a lot of general managers and you're very, very, linked up with these guys. Is there any concern right now that we're seeing players kind of want to, be more vocal, like Johnny Gaudreau didn't want to stay in Canada, wanted to get back to the US. Noah Hanifin saying, look, I'm a UFA. I'm not re-signing. I want to go back to the US. I get it. You want to be near home. You want to be back in the States if you're an American, but Canadian markets are unbelievable to play in. I mean, it's like being in the NFL when you play in a Canadian market. So is there like a trend we're seeing here? I mean, John Tavares, he's got a tax issue with the Canadian government now that he's dealing with because of money.
That's a separate side issue.
I understand that, but I'm just wondering, like, are these things adding up to each other? And are these things pushing players to want to play in the States?
I don't think so. And I don't think it's problematic, because I think Noah Hanifin's a great example. He's from Boston, as you mentioned, drafted by Carolina, plays there, gets traded to Calgary, and then has had no issues there. He's enjoyed his time there. By all means, it's been amicable, friendly. He's actually, thought long and hard about staying in Calgary. And at the end of the day, had let the Flames know last summer that his intention, when he was finally given the opportunity to sign as a free agent somewhere, that he wanted to play in the US. I think we'd be dealing with a different story had he gotten traded to Calgary and however many years ago, 5-6 years ago, said, nah, I'm good. I'm not going. I don't want to play there. That'd be a totally different scenario. And we haven't seen that happen often. For the most part, players have been really good about that. And let's remind everyone that like 35 to 40% of the NHL, if not more than that, is Canadian players.
Yeah.
And 22% of the league is Canadian teams. So there should be more than enough Canadian players to go around if that really became problematic. And I think, if anything, there's a lot of players that crave that environment that you're talking about, that crave playing in a market where things matter. And you are seeing some players, take the plunge and go play there. What about a Blake Coleman from Texas who decides to sign in Calgary? Like, it does happen. So I think everyone should have their choice. That's how a free market economy should work. That's how, when given the opportunity, you should be able to direct yourself where you'd like to go. Right. And I think everyone's better off for that, having that ability and right.
Well, and I'll say this, Johnny, before you jump in, and I know you've got a couple questions for Frank, is James Van Riemsdyk loved his time in Toronto. I mean, because
look, you're talking to an American who has worked for 10 years now in Canada. Right. All I've ever wanted to be is a hockey writer. If you want to be a hockey writer and have some juice, the only place you can go work is in Canada.
Well, because they treat it like the NFL. I mean,
that's why I work there. Right. So, if you get it and you get it as a player, that's where you want to play. Not to say you can't have that same experience in Boston, Chicago, Philly, New York, whatever, Detroit, whatever it might be. You can. It's just not. It's still not the same. The Rangers are special, but they're still mostly anonymous in New York City.
Yeah, it's like being on the Toronto Maple Leafs is like playing for the Dallas Cowboys or, Vancouver, any of those Canadian markets. I mean, I honestly, I'll be honest, I'm not sure I appreciate it as much until I became a broadcaster and I started calling games in Winnipeg, in Calgary, in Edmonton. When I was doing it for Chicago, it kind of opened my eyes. I knew about it, but I got to feel it a little bit different when you're up in the press box and you're calling a game and you see everyone and you see the festivities around a regular season game in Edmonton, for example. Pretty awesome. So
it's an event. Like, people in Edmonton in that region, I'm not kidding. There are people who will drive in 5 hours to go see a regular season game, and they'll stay over and they'll make a big deal out of one regular season NHL game. You're not getting that anywhere else.
It's nuts. We actually have a question from a listener from the chat. Ducks go. Super stoked for Frank. I want to know if Vetrano value went up now that he's on goal number 26 yesterday.
He's had a hell of a year, and I think personally any team would be wise to be calling the Ducks to see if they could pry him out of Anaheim. And is there any inkling of Pat Verbeek to listen? That would be part of it. I'd imagine that he's in a position with his team right now where he'd have to consider anything that comes down the pike, and that, is certainly of interest to them. But the only thing that gives me some pause is that Frank Vetrano had voiced kind of pretty clearly at the All-Star break that, and it's not his choice, but the idea that he'd really like to stay with the Ducks and likes what they're building and is all in on that. That part might give me some slight pause, but if I'm not mistaken, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, he's also a pretty good playoff player too, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He was great here in New York for the run in 2022. That's for sure. And he actually has spoken, off the record about how much he loves playing in New York. And I don't know if that's something that would attract him to leave, but
I feel like, Johnny, honestly, I wonder if some of that is just him being a good guy and feeling like he needs to say the right things. I mean, we had him on our show, which was funny, obviously for a different reason, but I just wonder too, if look, everybody loves living in Newport Beach, California, but the Ducks are a ways off. They really are. Yes, they have pieces, but part of me, I kind of think that he's just saying what he thinks he should say and not exactly how he means, because he is a gamer and he probably really wants to play in the playoffs and have opportunities to win. It's going to be a while before he can do that.
You're saying that about Anaheim or about New York?
No, I'm saying that he probably would be happy to be traded, whether he loves living in Newport Beach or not, or he loves being in the sun and in Southern California or not. He is a competitive hockey player who probably wants to win and go play in front of the bright lights again.
This season is still a statistical outlier, though, right? He's had an unbelievable year, but for the most part, you can pencil him in for somewhere between 18 and 22 goals and 40 to 48 points.
Well, he's typically been like a third line player in his career.
Right. So if you could fleece another team because of it, I feel like Pat Verbeek would be crazy not to.
Yeah. And look, I think the next question, if you're Pat Verbeek, would be asking, okay, he has 1 year left, and then what? Would we be re-signing this guy at a premium based on his production? The answer is probably doesn't make any sense for them to.
Right. So I think he gets traded. I really do. I don't see him sticking around there. But Verbeek seems like a guy who doesn't really tip his cap to things. So we shall find out.
I guess you could say he's not a big talker.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Here's another player I want to ask you about, Frank, a guy who's right in our backyard here in Philadelphia. And we hear Scott Laughton's name basically year in and year out. And the guy is he's a really, really valuable guy in the locker room. He's a leader. He plays basically everywhere in your lineup. He's really settled into a fourth line role for Torts, where I think in previous regimes, we've seen him higher up the lineup. The timing of putting the C on Sean Couturier and giving an A to Travis Konechny, I wonder, does it have anything to do with the fact that Scott Laughton, who is kind of the only consistent letter wearer for that team, because he is being shopped, or is that just yet again noise surrounding Scott Laughton?
I think it's more noise than anything. My understanding is the Flyers first began to discuss naming a captain when they went through their 5-game losing streak right before the All-Star break. It just so happened to coincidentally there was a question asked of John Tortorella in a press conference the day before or 2 days before it was almost exactly the way you just phrased it. Hey, Scott Laughton's the only guy here who wears a letter. What happens if he's traded? What will you do? And then they named Sean Couturier the captain. So I think more coincidence than anything else. But I would say when it comes to Laughton, you're right. It's not lost on me that his usage and deployment has changed. He is playing 3 fewer minutes a night than he was last year. And his production is down. His shooting percentage is in half of what it was 1 year ago when he had a career year. And I can't tell whether that's just Torts being Torts or whether that is the Flyers beginning to recognize that this player who has given them a lot over parts of 11 seasons is starting to go the other way at age 30 or will soon be 30. And so I think that's an important consideration. I think the other part of it for the Flyers is they watched what Sean Monahan got, right? And I think seeing him go for a late first round pick, they say this is a player who's been injury riddled, who is having a great season and is obviously way more productive than Scott Lawton has ever been. That's just this year. And he goes for a late first as a rental. What could we get for him as someone who has 2 years left on his deal? I think that part has piqued their curiosity. I think the Flyers are ready to make a move. I think they've set a high asking price. And if they get it, they're going to take it. And if not, they're more than happy to keep him.
Frank, I just got an interesting text message from a friend who listens to the show. Mike Grinnell, the producer of Spit and Chicklets, said, ask Frank, what the F are the Bruins going to do? Adam Henrique is not the answer. Love, all Bruins fans.
It's a good question. And I would say, look, they're limited on assets. I think the Bruins would absolutely like to add. I think Don Sweeney is making a ton of calls to try and find some depth pieces that can help. Like, think back to this summer and the moves that they made. Colby brought up earlier in the show James Van Riemsdyk. They made a bunch of veteran signings for little money to try and spend what little cap space they had to improve the team. They don't have a first round pick, second or third this year, no second next year. I think, first off, this team has shown that they're able to compete even without Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. And I think part of the Bruins thinking has to be, look how wide open this East is. Mm-hmm. We loaded up last year acquiring all those players, and it didn't help us any when it came to the playoffs. We still lost in the first round. And I think part of it, I'd have to be thinking, let's just roll with what we've got instead of go crazy trying to add pieces to this team. So I think the depth moves sometimes are what end up being the most important moves, because let me remind you, the last two Stanley Cup winners, Vegas and Colorado, in both years that they won, they didn't trade their first round pick. So it's not always the crazy, sexy splash that ends up being the difference maker. And so, if I'm the Bruins and I've played as well as I have a lot of times on the strength of their goaltending, I wouldn't be concerned about trying to go crazy at this deadline.
Well, so you wouldn't think we constantly hear Matt Grzelcyk's name. I know he's not on your board, but I mean, again, it's almost like Scott Lawton. We hear Grizz's name every single year. I feel like DeBrusk is another name that gets thrown out there. And look, I've obviously seen the connections of Hanifin to Boston. How real are they? I think I saw that from you, Frank. I think you put something on social media that said something about maybe Boston being a little bit ahead than Toronto or something.
In fact, when it comes to Hanifin,
Tampa,
teams,
right?
Teams around the league believe that Tampa is the team that Hanifin has signaled to Calgary that he'd like to end up. Now, that's probably in the summer because, again, they don't have the assets. And as much as the Lightning might try and strong arm the situation and say, hey, this is a guy that only wants to come here, and I don't know if that's happening or not. I think the struggle for the Flames is really trying to develop a market for Hanifin outside of a real select few teams that have assets and a need to do it.
Frank, on the topic of the Bruins, though, I'm curious if you were Don Sweeney. I know there was some chatter about it on social media earlier in the year. Would you take calls on Linus Ullmark or no? Because I mean,
why?
Not at all. Because Swayman's obviously their guy going forward.
Is he though? They still rotate. So? Well, they still rotate. So I think Swayman is better, right?
Yeah.
But
And they have Brandon Busty in the minors, who's a really good goaltender. Like,
yeah, but you've got the best tandem in the NHL, and you've had two of the best regular seasons over the past 2 years with aging play. Like, I don't know. I think they're going to keep rolling the two of those guys right into the playoffs. Like, I really do. I mean, obviously, I don't have the inside knowledge that Frank has, but I probably watch the Bruins more than any other team, or at least as much as I watch any team. And I don't know why you'd screw that up. I mean, you've got a really good thing going there.
I've seen that conversation pop up on social media a couple times throughout the season, just because when Swayman was playing at his best and the Bruins had injuries, like, Patra got hurt recently, and the center position has been somewhat of an issue for Boston, right? They were the ones that thought they were going to get Elias Lindholm. They don't get him. And,
guess where the Bruins rank in save percentage this year as a team?
Top 5.
I mean, I'd say first. Second
only because Hellebuck has been insane. And by the way, Hellebuck 927, Brossoit has been really good at 920. But the Bruins are second. We've made it clear that outside of having one of those 5 to 7 super elite goalies, Hellebuck, Saros, Vasilevsky, I'd include Shesterkin in that category. Sorokin, I'd probably include Demko and Ottinger. So those are the 7 guys, right? Now, outside of that, it's a 2 goalie league. So you've got Ullmark for 1 more year, and you've got Swayman hitting RFA again this year. And they're both adding up to reasonable cap hits for a goaltending tandem. Why would you do anything to disrupt the backbone of your team? I think that's a big reason why the Bruins have been able to be stable this year in spite of their losses, to try and sort of cash in on that value when goalies don't really have a ton of value to begin with. And as well as Ullmark has played, no one includes him in those 7 goalies that we're talking about.
So true.
How much value are you really going to bring back? I think what you end up doing if you make a trade like that is you then go out and have to try and find the next Ullmark. And it's proven that that's really difficult to do.
All right. So last one that I have for you, Frank, and then I'm sure Johnny might have another one for you, but
one more.
John Davidson came out the other day and said Boone Jenner isn't going anywhere. Why not? Why? Like, I can't understand that. Why is that just driving up the price for him, or does he mean that? I mean, anytime Columbus does anything other than fire Yarmo, I'm just like baffled at everything they do and they say. And I keep going back to the fact this is one of the great fan bases in the NHL. This is a place players actually want to go play. Johnny Gaudreau picked them. Provorov was thrilled to go there.
Tilly wanted to go there.
Tilly wanted to go there. Like, but every time they do something publicly, I'm like, I'm shaking my head. Maybe I'm nuts. I don't know. Why wouldn't Boone Jenner be available?
I don't think John Davidson is playing any Jedi mind tricks with anyone. I mean, I really don't. I truly think that when he says Boone Jenner isn't available, he isn't available. And
why?
It's been one head scratching
Maybe he wants to stay.
It's been one head scratching thing after another for the Blue Jackets, who, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, but John Davidson said on the Blue Jackets broadcast the other night that he was texting with Jarmo Kekalainen, who was watching their AHL team's game on Saturday night. And he said that Jarmo Kekalainen will do, quote, some stuff for us in the future, meaning like what? Scouting? I have no idea what he has up his sleeve, but like my mind was absolutely blown. Like, you just fired this guy earlier in the week, and now you're drumming up his next line of work within the own organization. Like, help it make sense. Help it make sense. So I'm with you with that Blue Jackets team. They've got a long way to go to get to where they want to. I think my only concern in moving Boone Jenner is they're already really thin down the middle. If you take him out of their lineup, he's been asked to basically play first line minutes this year. Who's going to be filling that spot? And I know the young guys are on the way, but is anyone really ready to rip off first line center minutes right here, right now? I think you'd probably hang on, and I think his value is going to be the same next year as it is this year.
I agree. Maybe he wants to stay though. No, he's been
I'm
there.
sure he does want to stay. He's been there a long time.
Whole career. Frank, we have one more question from the chat. J-Rock. Frank, what is the most intriguing storyline for you moving through the rest of the regular season?
It's got to be the Coyotes, right?
Definitely
Where are
up
the
there.
Coyotes going? It's, I think
Oh,
they're,
man.
I've never been more convinced that they're going to Salt Lake, but every time I say that, the Coyotes fans just say that I'm a hater and I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I don't think they've ever been closer to moving. And I just think the NHL has had enough. I think the other members of the Board of Governors have had enough, and they're tired of empty promises of, hey, we're looking at a parcel of land, or we're going to go get a parcel of land. Stop talking, just do. No more words, just action.
I mean, we've talked about this, I feel like, so many times.
It's
so
annoying at this point. They are annoying at this point, especially the way they are on social media.
Which, by the way, not confirmed, but a lot of people believe that it's the owner's son, Alex Seravalli Jr., who is actually tweeting from the account.
It would make sense because he's the only one who could probably not get fired doing what he's doing. Because it's so
bizarre.
I defended them. I defended Mullet Arena. I said, let's be patient. I really did. I was a total apologist for them for a while now, and I am off that train completely and annoyed by it. So,
because Mullet Arena sounds fun in theory.
Looked like the Oilers Nation guys had fun yesterday.
Yeah, it is. I'm sure it's a really cool experience, but it's like the Stadium Series, to put a bow on our conversation. It's a novelty that if you would do it year after year, again and again, people are like, wait a second, is this actually an NHL franchise or not?
Yeah.
This is embarrassing. So, all right, Frank. Well, look, we appreciate your time today. I'll see you in a couple of hours. I'll be sitting in with you on DFO Live today at noon Eastern on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, Twitter, everywhere else. So I'll see you soon, Frank. Appreciate your time. As always, a pleasure.
See you guys.
Thank you, Frank. Colby, we actually have a question for you in the chat. I don't know if you had something in mind, though.
So I've been looking at the chat, and I did want to address a couple of things. I'll let you ask. Let me just address one thing I saw in the chat.
Yeah.
And then you can ask the question that you want. So I saw it's Danny May 88 LBC said, it feels like Philly isn't going to rebuild, but retool and push. That Drysdale trade fast-tracked them a little bit. They've got a lot of young talent. Then they could add Mitchkoff in a couple of years. I don't agree with that. I do believe that they're rebuilding. I do not agree with the retool and push. I don't think a retool is the right way. I think Torts has really gotten a lot out of this group, and he's really building a standard in the way that they play to a point where it's not going to matter who they plug in. They're going to play to that standard. I do believe that they still have work to do on a rebuild. I do believe they're still going to walk away from some players that are going to sting the fans in Philadelphia because of how they've competed this year. But at the end of the day, I do not think the Flyers are ready to compete for the Stanley Cup. And I do think the goal is to create a base and a standard over the next couple of seasons that make them competitive to win a Stanley Cup and make them a team that's buying at the deadline, make them a team that's pushing their chips all in to compete to win. So I do not think it's a retool. I do believe it's a rebuild. It might not be a 5-year, 7-year rebuild like you might see in other places like Chicago. But I just don't want people to get too excited because look, I still believe the Flyers should make the playoffs this year, but I do not believe that they will have a long playoff run. So I just wanted to address that for my Flyers fans, for the Flyers fans out there that are in the chat. We appreciate you guys jumping in. And
I think that would also benefit them to do that, to do it that way. It wouldn't benefit them to go in all in right now, right? Like, exactly. I mean, I know the East is wide open, and maybe that's where this question is coming from. But you got to build toward that, like, next, what?
Listen, they also need to refortify their goaltending situation. Yeah. They've got Sam Merson. They got to figure out, is he the guy for the future? He looks good. He looks like he's kind of learning. They've got Cal Peterson. But they've got moves to make. And so far, all I can say is to Flyers fans that are listening to this, trust the people in charge, because you've got great people from Jonesy to Danny B to Torts, and even above them.
Are you pulling out of Philly trust the process right now?
No, because that whole thing was a disaster and they still haven't won by any means. So I just think that top down, the Flyers are in good shape right now. And I think people have a reason to be excited, but just be patient. Be patient. Too much too soon will hurt you later.
All right, we have a question from Chef Richard. Colby, do you think Rutger McGroarty will find his way in the Jets roster for the playoffs, or do you think he'll stay in school for another year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure what Rutger's plans are. I do talk to Rutger. I do talk to his dad all the time. We're all pretty close, but I have never actually asked him that question. The only thing I can tell you is last year at the Frozen Four, sitting around having some beers with Rutger's dad, we talked about the importance of patience and not rushing to professional hockey to go play in the American League. So I think it really kind of depends on where the Jets see him. Look, I think he's the kind of guy, and we've seen this every couple of years, where a college player can jump in and make an impact right away. When you look at the way Rutger plays, I think he's one of those guys. I really do.
I think Nyes, yeah, like last
year. I think he's similar to Nyes in the fact that he's a heavy player. He's a straight line player. He's not afraid to take a punch to the face trying to score a goal. So he's got a lot of great leadership qualities. So yeah, I think he could help them. Will he jump? I don't know the answer to that question. I think winning matters to him. So I think it could potentially revolve around how well they do. How do they finish? Do they make the tournament? How much time of the season's left? So I don't have a great feel for it, to be honest with you. I will as we get closer to the end, because I'll talk to them a little bit. But I do think he's the type of player that could step in and play right away.
I fully agree. I think he would actually be a huge boost to their playoff push too, if they actually do end up going for it. But again, too, similar situation with the West. Rutger might not need to jump into a situation where the Western Conference has 6 really strong teams right now that are pushing for the Stanley Cup, where he could have that one extra year of development. I know it's been this is his sophomore year, right?
This will be his sophomore year. Yeah.
So one more year. I mean, usually we've seen as of late college guys do the 2 years, then make the jump. But
exactly, that's seemingly the trend for these first round picks. But again, he comes from a hockey family, and I don't think they're going to rush. If they don't feel like he's totally ready, I don't think he's going to rush.
But here's the question too, and not to, this is no speculation or anything at all. I'm just asking you the question. If he does go back to school next year, does he then become a free agent?
He then the end of that year? At the end of his senior year. He went as a true freshman. Okay. He got drafted after his U18 year, so he's got that 4-year clock. But look, it makes teams uncomfortable when guys go back for their junior years, especially at the Winnipeg. So it's a situation we're going to monitor. It is, but I wouldn't be shocked if he came out. I really wouldn't. And I, like I said, that has not come from them. I haven't asked them that question. Hopefully I'll be spending time with them at the Frozen Four, or I'll be in the Providence Regional, the East Regional with John Butchergross for the NCAA, first couple rounds. So hopefully I'll get a chance to see him live at one of those two, and I'll find more out, and I'll let you guys know.
All right, Colby. Well, it's time to go into one of. See, I think I actually said Colby there, and I missed the B. But
the fact that you can't get my name right is just troubling to me.
I think it's just the way I talk. Also, I kind of noticed Frank maybe missed the L too one time, but you're not gonna call him out though.
He nailed it.
Let's go into one of our favorite things that we do on this show, and that's our power rankings. We haven't done it in I think like 3 weeks. Before All-Star break was the last time we did it. So it's been a while since we've kind of gone back and forth here about the top 5 teams in the NHL, but let's see what we've got here. Pretty similar.
Wow. You finally got
the Oilers out.
You finally got the Edmonton Oilers up into the power rankings, and I got to be honest, I haven't loved the way that they played.
Really?
Let's just start there. I mean, look, when the Oilers were on that winning streak, I just felt like the way they were managing the puck, I was all in on them, because that's what it comes down to for the Oilers. We know the talent, we know the stars, right? But it comes down to puck management and goaltending. And look, Skinner's been a little iffy. Their puck management has been disappointing, to say the least. Now, they got a huge win in overtime against Dallas. That was a big win on ABC. And then they beat up on Arizona yesterday, but that was touch and go. And I got to be honest with you, I just haven't loved. I've been on the Oilers bandwagon all year, but the way
that's why I'm surprised.
But listen, the way they've played the last, basically since the All-Star break, they're back to playing run and gun, high scoring, give up a lot of goals, score a lot of goals. And to me, that's not going to get it done for the Edmonton Oilers. So they probably would have been 6 or 7. I didn't put the Bruins on there either because I just don't like the way that they're playing. Although they got the shootout win yesterday, I don't like the way they're playing either. I really don't. There's been a lot of holes in their game.
But you love the Canucks giving up 7 goals in the third period yesterday?
Listen, that was one game. They're what, 5? They're 5-3-2 in their last 10, so they're still winning. That means in their last, basically 7 of their last 10, they got points. So it's not like they're not getting points. And look, you look at their goal differential, the way it's continued, it's way higher than everybody else's. They continue to play like an elite team. They really do. Even though it's been, not as consistent since the All-Star break or their last 10, they're still 5-3-2 for their last 10. So let's get the board back up because it's funny. Like we're
kind of aligned everywhere else.
We're very aligned. I think Carolina has started to get some saves. And Spencer Martin's he's 3-0 with a 920 since they brought him in. If Carolina gets 920 goaltending, they're going to win a lot of hockey games. I have them a little bit higher than you do. I also have the Rangers higher than you do, which is shocking to me because you're such a super fan.
But also with Carolina, though, I do want to point out, because I feel like a lot of the time people say they don't have the superstars, they don't get the consistent scoring, but this team's been scoring a lot of goals lately, especially since Christmas. And, I looked at their numbers since then. Their power play is at a 33.9%. And their PK is at an 86.4%. Like, their special teams have been on the money, and they have guys like Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Seth Jarvis, and Brent Burns, who are basically point per game guys since then. Like, they do need
to get Kotkaniemi going.
Yeah.
Because he's got his first goal or something in like a month yesterday. I mean, he needs to get going for that team. I mean, they gave him a contract. They brought him over with the offer sheet. He needs to do more. I think Drury is playing up on the second line for Carolina, and Kotkaniemi is on the fourth line. That's not the recipe for success. I watched a little bit of that game yesterday. It was pretty funny in the pregame. Trip Tracy did an interview with Rod Brindamore. That was hysterical. It was really funny because he talked about Rod Brindamore taking his shirt off after Canada won the World Cup or something in Bolzano, Italy, all these years ago. And I guess Luke Richardson told the story to Trip Tracy, the broadcaster for Carolina, and Rod completely denied it. He's like, I don't know what he's talking about. He completely denied it, and he was super uncomfortable. It was a funny interview. I mean, Rod keeps it pretty tight. But how about the Panthers, Johnny? I mean, look, we both have them.
I'm being chirped. I'm being chirped in the chat right now for I don't know what reason. Someone said, it's Danny May 88 said, where's Edmonton, Johnny? I have Edmonton in there. Oh, he said, nice. But then Duxco said, shock, Johnny doesn't have Vancouver in the top 5. Yikes. And I had Vancouver in the top 5 basically every time we've done this.
I know you do.
This time.
You usually have them higher than me, actually.
I've had Vancouver in like the top 3, I think, both or all 3 times we've done this.
All right, but let's give some love to the unanimous number 1 in the NHL right now. I mean, look, if the NHL playoffs started right now, I'm putting it all on the Florida Panthers because there's nobody playing better than the Florida Panthers right now. And actually, I kind of feel like we missed by not asking Frank what they're going to do because, look, they're not going to sit tight with their bottom 6. I think they're going to go out and they're either going to move on from Luosterainen or Lundell or one of these third, fourth line players to bolster that third or fourth line. And I could see them bringing in some depth on the back end as well, just because, look, we've seen the fact that Zito doesn't sit on his hands. He's not afraid to do stuff, but he's not going to make the splashy Giroux trade like he made in prior years. He's going to go and bring in depth, which is what Frank talked about on our show, has worked for teams that have won the last couple of Stanley Cups.
But I don't really know what holes their back end really has. Like their back end seems to be a pretty
holes.
strong
I
group.
said depth. How about depth? You want to fortify that third pair. You want to have options. I'm talking depth types of players. And then how about this for depth? They still have Spencer Knight in Charlotte in the American League, right? So now you have 3 goaltenders that are very capable because you've got Bobrovsky. Stolarz has been really good when you've called upon him. And then you've got really the guy we all thought was the heir apparent who had to go work on, personal things in the assistance program, not drugs or alcohol related whatsoever. I know that for a fact. This was other things that he had to work through. All right. And he's a guy who, would be a great option come playoff time. If Bob, you never know what you're really going to get out of Bob. He's always kind of been that way. So the Florida Panthers are better than everybody else. Like, to me, they are number one. And then there's a bunch of teams under them that, on any given night can fight and look like an elite team. But the Florida Panthers are playing some phenomenal hockey right now. You almost don't, you worry, Johnny, are they peaking a little too early?
No, I mean, this was the same case last year, right? They started getting hot like toward that All-Star break or around this time of year. But they were fighting for their playoff lives last year. So it's a little bit of a different scenario. But again, this is a team that 2 years ago, they won the President's Trophy, and they're right back in the mix to win it again this year. Like, there was that, maybe fluky start last year and everyone was questioning. And even me this year, I thought, they were too banged up from the Stanley Cup final.
Listen, I thought they were going to struggle off the bat and maybe miss the playoffs without Montour, without Ekblad. And then all of a sudden,
Tkachuk's injury.
Gustav Forsling is having the season of his life in
Best
Florida.
plus in the NHL.
And they said goodbye to Radko Gudas, who is an important guy for them. I worried about them early on.
I think we lost Colby from the show. I think he was saying that he was worried about the Panthers scoring and whatnot. Oh, you're back.
I never actually left. I got kicked out to the back room or whatever you call it.
You were frozen on my screen there for a second, but what were you saying? Please continue. You were in the middle of a good rant.
Saying Oliver Ekman-Larsson has been he's been tremendous. Like, he's had a career year. So, look, the Florida Panthers seem like the team to beat right now. That is for sure. I mean, they've played better than anybody else for a stretch of time here.
And Matthew Tkachuk specifically, he's leading the NHL in points since the new year. I mean, the Panthers right now are 14-3-2 since that time. Tkachuk has 37 points in 19 games. I mean, unbelievable. Almost at 2 points per game, which is pretty crazy for him, especially with the injury that he had. They have 11 straight wins on the road. The Florida Panthers just continue to impress. But other teams that we should talk about, the Dallas Stars, we both have in there. The New York Rangers, we both have in there. We've already touched on Edmonton and Carolina, but do you want to talk about Dallas? Because we haven't given Dallas love at all this year, I feel like.
Well, look, I have always been hesitant with Dallas, although I love Pete DeBoer. I really do. I love Pete DeBoer, but I've always just been hesitant. But they've continued to be good. They've continued to get goaltending from Ottinger. They're playing without Miro Heiskanen right now. And I mean, that's the lifeblood of their power play. I think they lost to Boston in the shootout yesterday, a long shootout.
Great game.
It was a good game, no doubt. And they're going to play the Rangers today. I mean, I kind of want to pivot into previewing today's games, Johnny, because that's a big matchup today. And here's my question to you. Jonathan Quick take the net today for them after
he should start.
He should start. Well, I mean, you're playing against an elite team in the NHL. Wouldn't you play your number one?
Yeah, but they're also probably going to start Scott Wedgwood. Jake Ottinger played yesterday.
Why are you worried about who they're going to start? They're on a back-to-back. The Rangers are not.
And I think that plays into the fact of who you start in goal, though. If the other team's on a back-to-back, you're not getting their best, right? Like, I think that's just kind of how it
I mean,
goes in the
Scott
NHL.
Wedgwood's a pretty capable backup. He's been
Of
pretty
course,
good.
but it's not Jay Gottinger. And I think, listen, with the emotion of Sunday's game, it's a perfect spot for a letdown, right? So I think just with everything that Igor has gone through over the past couple of days with
So
building
you're
up
saying
for
that you have
game,
to protect Shesterkin, is what you're saying.
I think that's been the case for a while now. I think they've been doing that. After the All-Star break, he didn't play the first 2 games. They gave Jonathan Quick back-to-back games against the Colorado Avalanche, Tampa Bay Lightning. Jonathan Quick has earned the right to play. I think I would start him no matter what in this game. I think just because of the way they're going right now, the way they're trending right now, they're kind of doing this 1A, 1B sort of rotation, which is, I think, in my opinion, it's correct with how good Jonathan Quick has played.
I agree, but I just think that you're playing the Dallas Stars. It's a absolute marquee matchup.
But
and if you have
you're playing the Avalanche, you're playing the Lightning, and Jonathan Quick stepped in and played great games. It's not like the Stars
I
are better.
get that, but that's when Shesterkin was, they did this whole thing where they played Quick a couple games in a row. They worked with Shesterkin with the goalie coach, and he played well a couple of games. Then he didn't. He let up 4 against the Islanders the other day. I don't know. I would just think if you have a true bona fide number one and you're playing the Dallas Stars in what could be a preview of the Stanley Cup Finals, I think you'd want to go with Shesterkin. I agree with you. They'll go with Quick, but I think that shows you that maybe, you're worried about protecting Igor Shesterkin.
And they also have a divisional rival. They got a divisional rival on Thursday in New Jersey. I think that's a pretty big game that Igor is going to have to be ready for. You're trying to stir the pot right now. You're trying to make some shit.
No, I'm not trying to stir the pot. You've got a good situation with 2 good goaltenders, but I just always go back to the fact that these true number one goalies there's not a lot of them. And when you have them, they should be the guy. There should be no protecting a true number one against an opponent. You want to protect him from fatigue come playoff time, but it's also have to protect Igor Shesterkin from any opponent, and that's what you're telling me they're doing.
But I think you're also making this more about Shesterkin when a lot of it has to do with how good Quick has been.
Okay,
like that to me is the story that Jonathan Quick has played well enough where he deserves more games, and I think that should be the narrative, not protecting.
Well, that's because you're Johnny Sunshine and Rainbows, but. All right, a couple other games today.
So you agree, then you have to take a dig to wrap it up.
No, we're not wrapping. We've got other games I want to talk about. Islanders versus Pittsburgh. This is the Metropolitan Stink Bowl here. The Islanders 3 straight. The Penguins haven't scored a power play goal since you were a teenager, it seems like. We didn't ask Frank if the Penguins are close to selling, but man, the Penguins. It is interesting, though, with the Penguins. Like, they have a plus goal differential, and they're so far down the rankings. You never see that in the standings, a team that far down the standings with a plus goal differential. Both teams really need this game. But at the end of the day, I don't think either of these teams are playoff teams, Johnny. So I mean, listen, it's a big 2 points, but is it really? Are either of these 2 teams really playoff teams? With the way the Devils are surging right now, with the way the Devils are surging, and they're starting to sniff towards a playoff spot. Are either of these teams really playoff? I mean, I think the Devils are much more of a playoff threat than the Islanders, and I think Pittsburgh's out of it, in my opinion. I really do. So is that game really?
It's a big 2 points for our Flyers catch bet.
Okay, fine. There you go. So this is personal for you. You got Ottawa, Florida. Hopefully Florida doesn't take them lightly. Ottawa's continued to just, be Ottawa. Yeah, they won yesterday, but come on. They're not actually making
any. That clip from yesterday's game?
Which clip? Oh, yeah, we were talking about this before the show, right?
Uh-huh. You don't remember?
Yeah, let's get the clip. Vic, do you have it?
Mitchell Chafee and Tim Stützle?
Yeah, let's talk about this play, because Johnny... Oh, yeah, okay. Johnny Bad Take.
Here we go.
Now I remember. So this Mitchell Chafee, good player, played at UMass, Johnny's boy. He tries to take a run at Stützle, okay?
Couldn't disagree more.
Absolutely smashes him over, And then Chafee's mad and bear hugs him from behind and tackles him. And then Johnny puts on Twitter, "Don't mess with Mitchell Chafee." I mean, honestly, Chafee got his clock clean there trying to cheap shot Stützle.
He's not trying to cheap shot Stützle. He's not even looking at him.
Mitchell Chafee. You're such a homer. It's ridiculous. You're such a homer.
He's not even looking at Stützle. He's trying to get around him.
No, he tries to run Stützle, who's on the ground, and he ends up getting tossed.
No, can we get the clip again, Vic, please?
I want to hear people in the chat's opinion here.
Yeah.
Doesn't Chafee try to run Stützle here and then get knocked over by a stronger player?
He's not even looking at him. He's taking his route. He's curling around. His left leg's in the air.
To run a guy who's down.
Could not disagree more. And then Stützle acts on it, and then obviously Chafee's going to respond. You think that's taking a run right there? He's not even looking at him. He's not even looking at him.
He knows what he's doing. Chafee tries to hit a defenseless player, and he takes the worst of it. Don't give me this. Don't mess with Mitchell Chafee. Listen, Chafee had a goal yesterday. He had a goal. He could have had a couple of goals yesterday. He's finding his way in the NHL. Give the guy credit, but don't make him out to be a tough guy when he gets his ass knocked over trying to run a guy who's on his knees. Much stronger player, clearly, Tim Stützle. Let's move on.
Couldn't disagree more.
Definitely tries to run him. You can see him load up for it. Joe Mama. Hit that. See? Colby is correct.
Maybe we'll get Chafe on here. We'll get Chafe on here to talk about it, maybe.
Neil Foddy agrees as well. Johnny, you're 0 for 2 in the chat right now. Sorry, buddy.
I'm never winning in the chat. Doesn't matter.
Last game I want to ask you about before we say goodbye today is Vancouver, Colorado. Colorado hasn't played great. Okay. No. Neither of us had them in the top 5 of the power rankings for the first time since we started our power rankings.
Okay? They've been my one every week too.
Vancouver just gave up a touchdown and a field goal. So you got to think they're going to be fired up. Demko will be starting, we would assume, for Vancouver in this game because DeSmith gave up the 10 spot to Minnesota. That game will probably be a game where both teams are pretty fired up. I don't think Talk's going to be real happy after giving up 10. Oh, wow. Ducks go. Yeah, Stützle was protecting himself. I disagree with you, Johnny. Colby calling him a homer based on Colby's rich... Wait, Colby calling him a homer is rich based on his Blackhawk takes. Do we ever talk about the Blackhawks?
I don't know. Not really. But I like it, though, because it sides with me.
but I don't think we really talk about the Blackhawks that much.
Not that much, no.
Okay. Shafe needs to get in the weight room before you get him on here because
Shafe can squat 600 pounds.
I do think he's a pretty pretty dope. But he got his ass handed to him.
Yeah, because he wasn't expecting it because he wasn't going to hit him.
And it was just funny to watch you jump in on Twitter and lay a bad take out there. And it's just funny the people in our chat are siding with me, which just brings absolute joy to my ears.
I haven't seen Kobe smile this hard in 2 months.
Oh, I love it. But
back to Colorado.
What? Let's have a segment called Johnny's Bad Takes that we do once a week. I think that would be a good segment.
Well, did you see the tweet I had yesterday with the PEMDAS thing? People were tagging you in that. You didn't see that?
Oh, the math equation. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
Yeah.
I just rolled my eyes and moved on with that. I wasn't gonna weigh in.
Yeah, that was a rough one. But let's kind of wrap up the show.
But I'll give you props because after you made a fool of yourself, you left it there, and you're good at that. That. You own it, and I'll give you that. You do own it well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Because you're like a golden retriever.
All right, let's wrap up the show. A lot of good hockey games on tonight. 8 NHL games. I think the Colorado-Vancouver game is definitely the game to watch. It's going to be a lot of high-flying offense, back and forth, track meet, all that. The Avs have only won 2 out of their last 7 games, so they're just as desperate as Vancouver. I mean, the Avalanche right now are trending in a pretty bad direction, so they need to get this game going just as much as Vancouver does after yesterday. But, great show today. We should have some more fun tomorrow with all these games going on. Should we work on getting a guest for tomorrow? I don't know. What do you?
We'll see. We'll talk. Yeah. We'll talk offline.
All right. But thank you to everyone in the chat. Great questions for Frank.
Yeah. And we got to a lot of the chat today and J-Rock, just so you know, I'm not a Blackhawks fan. I worked there for 2 years. When I worked there, I definitely had some bias because that's where my paychecks were coming from. But I can tell you this, we rarely give any love to the Blackhawks on this show, but we got to listen, your St. Louis Blues got to give us more to talk about. If you're a Blues fan, they got to give us a little more to talk about. We love Kevin Hayes on this show. We were big Craig Berube guy. I've kind of heard that the players in St. Louis think the new coach is a little bit of a nerd, so we'll see how that works out. But we'll get a little Blues talk mixed into the show, but they got to give us a little more to talk about. No
Colby,
doubt.
plug DFO Live before you wrap it up.
We'll be on DFO Live today, noon Eastern, DFO on their YouTube page and Twitter and everywhere. I'll do that with Frank. That'll be a little different, but good show today, Johnny. For a guy who's pretty sick, you did pretty well. I'm proud of you. Good job.
Thank you. And one last shout out in the chat, because I actually have a friend on the team, Mark Delgaizo. Shout out to the Milwaukee Admirals, who have won 17 games in a row right now in the AHL. So
I like Delgaizo, good New Jersey boy. He was a good old UMass player.
Had a couple games with the Preds this year too. But all right, now we'll wrap it up finally, unless we have like 10 more shots to give. I don't think we do. But we have a show coming tomorrow, 9 a.m., same time. Hopefully I feel a little bit better. And hopefully Colby doesn't have more material to dunk on me with. But Joe Mama just said that we'll never run out of material if we do a Johnny Bad Take segment. So that is true. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Vic. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.